Please welcome Robert Palmer from WestJet, since we're talking about travel. Hello, Robert. Do you travel with a fan?
The fan. I love that. I was writing down. Got some good tips.
Well, let's talk a little bit about traveling, with your family. Most of our audience would be traveling with a family. So let's talk about the prep beforehand. We know how to do the carry-on now. We got it down to a science.
We do.
What do we need to prepare for beforehand, before you get on that plane?
Well, if you're traveling with kids, obviously you need to be prepared. So there's some things that you need to think about. Yeah. Actually, one of the things that parents don't necessarily think about is how their children travel to begin with. Are they good travelers, or are they kind of fussy, a little fidgety? Yeah. Think about that. Talk to your partner about it, and maybe develop some coping mechanisms. Talk about how you're going to handle things if things go a little bit sideways. Okay. Make sure you bring a toy or their favorite, whatever it may be, their stuffed animal, for example. Things that make them calm.
Right. I bumped into a friend on the weekend, and she's an Aussie, so she does end up going back to Australia every once in a while.
Well,
and what she does is, she starves her 2 girls of television for 2 weeks before they get on that plane. And it works every time. Because my rule is, I don't care about screen time once we're on the plane. You can watch until your eyes are bloodshot. As long as you're sitting there quietly in your seat, that's all right. Dora Marathon.
Well, people,
I have no problem with it.
They bring games or puzzles or books or little Nintendo or whatever it may be. Something that your child is used to using and helps keep them calm and occupied. That's the other important thing.
Okay, so you've planned for all of that. Let's talk a bit about packing your suitcase for this trip, your luggage. What do you need to know?
Well, it depends on who you are, because some things it's a little harder to pack for little babies, for example. You want to make sure that you have obviously your diapers and your wipes and things like that. And the diaper bag is extra. That's not something you're going to be charged for. You obviously want to make sure that you've got, if you're carrying a baby, you want to have your bottle and your breast milk, and those are exempt from the 100 mils that we were talking about earlier in Canada. So it's important that you know that for the flight down. And in fact, having all this stuff is really helpful, because when you're on the aircraft, of course, it's the pressure changes as you ascend and descend, and so you want to have that bottle or that juice box or whatever it may be, so that your child can help reduce the pressure in their ears. So things to think about in terms of packing, for sure.
What I noticed is that as you mentioned, the airports were really good about bringing in all that mommy stuff. So the formula, the bottles, like all of those exemptions were really helpful as a mom, because what if you've got an overseas flight, you want to make sure you have enough formula, and it is very dehydrating in the air. So they need a lot to drink, and they're going to need those constant bottles, or if they're on the breast, even better, because when they get fussy, nurse them, and it helps a lot. And the sucking, I find, helps for their ears.
It helps reduce the pressure in their ears, and that's one of the things that makes children anxious or causes them pain, because it can be painful.
Okay, so speaking of anxiety, you got to get to the airport at a certain time to make sure that you are not rushing through, because you have to go through many different levels in the airport. How early do you need to get there, and what kind of documentation do you need to have?
Well, for domestic flights, 1 hour is usually sufficient. For U.S., there's obviously, if you're carrying children and you've got the diaper bag and you've got the stroller and the car seat and all that sort of thing, you want to arrive a little bit earlier than that. 2 hours at a minimum for international flights. Okay. Definitely. Yeah. But and again, if you're traveling with kids, you want to make that a little bit earlier. Keep in mind that a lot of airports, you can't actually go through U.S. security or U.S. customs until the 2 hour mark. Okay. But that doesn't mean you want to get there 2 hours and 1 minute before. Right. You definitely want to try to get there a little bit early.
Okay, Robert Palmer, thank you very much for those tips.